So getting back to how Mouse ruined comics.
Okay.
I like Mouse.
No, Mouse is fine.
There's 3 tiers of art. There's high art, there's pop art, and then there's low art.
Right.
And then there's Forces of Good and Evil.
Yeah, that is way down there. I would agree.
All right, 30 seconds. Your 30 seconds are up. No more boomer music.
Do I really only get 30 seconds? I'm
Yeah,
not sure that makes any sense. It's my show.
I got to prevent that boomer virus from spreading.
Oh, I tell you what, it's just that's some of the best music.
Oh. Okay.
Anyway, moving on, because it is Wednesday. It is the Mattriarchy, and we didn't come here to talk about the Grateful Dead or the Ramones or anything. Right? We came here to talk about Jack Chick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He wasn't a boomer at all.
No, not at all. He was predated them by quite a bit. So that's a whole thing. A long running career for that man. But let's dive into this. We were supposed to have some guests, and every one of them were unable to make it for reasons, I guess. And nothing not to say for shame, because I don't feel that way, but it is a bit of a bummer. So that's that story.
I just feel embarrassed because I just tweeted it out twice. Hey, these people are going to be on stream.
Yeah. Well, so both FlyFox and Danny Connor, they had some stuff come up, and they weren't able to make it. I don't know what happened to Elrodimus. And I only know him as that. It's probably not a real name. But now we may never know. So who knows? But we are here, and the whole premise of the show is you want to talk about Jack T. Chick. And so, Twitless, who is Jack T. Chick?
Okay, so let me pull up my gajillion image references. So you can go to jackchick.com and you can actually read pretty much all of his tracks for free. He was also a comic book creator, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, I've got a couple. In fact, number one Marmaduke fan has done some reviews of some Jack Chick comics that he picked up somewhere along the road. You can go check it out on his channel. He's not here either.
Everybody's gone.
I never got a confirmation from him, but I did send him an invite just in case, because I knew he's got some knowledge on the subject.
All right, so I'm going to pull up his probably his most famous tract. So if you grew up in church, or if you've ever been to a restaurant, whether you've worked at one or you've attended one, you've probably seen these around. They're 5 inches by 2, about 3 inches, which I think apparently Jack Chick actually got from Chinese propaganda tracts as a strategy. But it's basically way to evangelize very quickly, very efficiently through the comics format. And like I said, This Was Your Life is a tract that has been probably seen by anyone who has any connection with any evangelical church. And some people have proclaimed that Jack Chick is possibly one of the most widely read comic book creators in existence. Just because of the massive spread. You can even today, you can buy, I think you can buy them for 18 cents a piece. So these things are made to be mass distributed, and oftentimes for free. People will often give them out. There are some, some negative stories about people giving them out instead of tips at restaurants. But
right. And let's back up just a second, because there might be somebody in the audience who doesn't know what a gospel tract is.
That's a good point.
Right. So I'm not trying to play anyone as ignorant here, but you just never know. But what a gospel tract is it's a quick presentation of the Christian gospel, right? In a way to engage the reader into thinking about their eternal destiny, right? And the idea of that is that, you know, that knowing the truth can set you free from sin and from eternal torment, all that kind of stuff. And there's something like that. But these tracts that Chick put together were intended to be something, a quick comic that you read just really quick and to get as much information in as quick as time as possible. And I think there are some significant arguments that Chick, because of the quantity of these that were handed out, with Halloween candy, with at church events, sometimes I've seen them slipped in the side of books in libraries and bookstores.
You can hide them anywhere.
Oh yeah, and they're not huge. And the question about the efficacy of them, put the theory about, is it good or not, set that aside for a second. Just think about if you're making comics like this, the format he used got read, and that's something that is worth noting.
Yeah, definitely. So the tracts are something that go, way into, not antiquity, but quite a long time ago, at least into I think there was some, call them like the Tractarian battles of, is it the 18th century?
Yeah.
Where you have people who were, making political tracts to, persuade people for a political point of view. The religious tracts, like I said, are used as an evangelism tool, and the Jack Chick tracts are unique because many other tracts are just kind of text-based. You hand them out and people are supposed to read them. The Jack Chick tracts gained quite a bit of fame and notoriety because of their comic book storytelling. Many of them have little plot lines, and most of them ending with a character who is going to hell or going to heaven. So most of them end or conclude or have to do with people who are dying and the afterlife. But again, because they're so cheap, and because
not all of them, and I'm sure we'll get to that too. So.
Not all of them, no, not all of them, but they all end with pretty much this panel here on the right, which is the very a very quick summary of the evangelical salvation method. So, like I said, probably his most popular one is This Was Your Life. It's one of his early ones, I believe. So the print date there says 2002, but I know he wrote that one earlier. So that just must be, I guess, the reprint of it or something. But it's the story of a guy who he gets whacked by the Grim Reaper, and then taken to to stand before God, and this was your life. And he watches it on like a cinema, like a film, and all of his sins are revealed. And then at the climax of it, God asks, is his name in the book of life? It is not. So he is cast into eternal torment. But the strip is, also shows what could have happened had he been saved. So like I said, if you are familiar, if you've ever grown up down, if you've ever grown up down or anywhere really where there are evangelical or fundamental churches around, you've seen, like I said, this tract probably in particular. My church had when I was growing up, there was a whole row of tracts, different of all varying sizes, but there was usually about 3 or 4 Chick tracts. And I remember reading them as a kid, and they terrified the hell out of me. So, which kind of helps us. And there's our daily crash. Goodness gracious. And then there was one. Alrighty. So while we wait for Rhys to come back, I will regale you with a little bit of more Jack Chick, I guess. So first off, you can go to chickpublications.com and you can read pretty much all of his strips for free. The comics you can read some excerpts of. So if you really have any interest into the Jack Chick phenomena, there's definitely plenty for you to work with. A couple of things that I'm going to note is that Jack Chick is known for being an incredibly controversial figure. He's known for, like I said, his taking a very hardline stance regarding salvation. He's known for taking an extremely hardline stance regarding the Bible. Let me see. I think, does it say on this one? Yep, right here. I'm going to see if I can zoom in a bit so anyone can see this. All righty. So at the final strip, or the final strip here, like I said before, Jack Chick was known for taking a very hardline stance regarding the translation of the Bible that he found was acceptable. So you'll see right here that as you grow in Christ, you're supposed to read your Bible, but it has to be the King James Version. Like I said, he was a stickler for a very particular version of the Bible. And he was known later on in his career for taking an extremely hardline stance against the Roman Catholic Church in particular. He became friends with there's a lot of debate regarding this character, a man named Alberto Rivera, and he was supposedly a Jesuit priest. And there's a lot of debate whether that is true or not. And there was a whole, hit piece in Christianity Today. And there's a lot of what some people what I definitely see is some conspiracy theory regarding the Roman Catholic Church's, role in global affairs. Jack Chick saw the Roman Catholic Church as the whore of Babylon, is what he called it, and he decided to just try to expose them as just the embodiment of Satan. So,
yeah,
like I said, go ahead.
And this is something that I was when we were setting this up. And of course, nobody except Twitless and I made it. I was really hoping that I could have gotten. I didn't get any tugs out to the Catholics that I know, but I was really hoping that I could get a hold of a Catholic who was aware of Chick and was kind of the whole thing, so we could talk that. Because I'll tell you, he did have a very dark view of the Catholic Church, and the problem with the sort of Catholic conspiracy theories idea is that in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church did do a lot of meddling in geopolitics. And they had a big reputation for it that didn't really get stopped, as effectively stopped until the War of the Grand Alliance. In
particular, the Jesuit orders. Like I said, if you read any fiction from previous centuries, the Jesuits are going to, in particular, come up.
Right. And it's one of those things where, that idiom existed within the world's consciousness. And for Jack, he just clearly believed that everything that could be wrong is wrong. And there's some imagery in the Book of Revelation, depending on how you read that out, that it shakes up. I don't want to get into the deeps of that, but there is he was an island, but he wasn't just an island. There are other people that held that opinion, and it's and I think, I don't know, I have this feeling like it kind of sullied some of what he had to do, kind of distracted from the purpose of the evangelical tract.
Yeah, so this is where I'm gonna. There's two sides to, I think, Jack Chick. Like I said, there's a really good YouTube series. He has a YouTube channel. He passed away some years ago, but his business partner David Daniels, who does quite a bit of research into things, kind of has taken up the business. And he did a very long, pretty extensive series of videos called "You Don't Know Jack," which is to examine, to examine the life of Jack Chick and to his background, his life, his beliefs, and the fact that he didn't just go off half-cocked. Whether or not his sources are reliable or not, and again, there's quite a bit of debate as to that, especially when it comes to Alberto Rivera. There is. He didn't just wake up one day and say, "I hate all the Catholics." There's actually a bit of personal history with Jack Chick and Catholicism. He had a really rough life. He was an unwanted child. His mother basically told him, "I tried to abort you several times," and his
Jeez,
father.
that's a heavy thing to try to live with.
Oh yeah, it gets better because after he actually did gain his fame and notoriety for his tracts, his mother called and said, "Don't tell anyone I'm your mother." She just So that was the love of mother he got. And he ended up working for his father, but after he was saved, his father told his wife, "You've ruined my son." So not a lot of love from the parents. I don't know if a lot of people don't know this. Jack Chick was actually a syndicated cartoonist for a time. He was syndicated in over 40 newspapers with a caveman strip called. Let's see if I can pull this up. It's a caveman strip called "Times Have Changed" with a question mark. Jack Chick.
I was not aware of this.
No,
I jumped off camera earlier. I was getting one of my Jack Chick floppies that I bought as a child about smuggling Bibles behind the Iron Curtain.
Ah.
Yeah. It's great. I love it. I actually pulled that out at one of our first Christianity and Comics shows a couple years ago. But let's see what we got here.
Yeah, so Jack Chick was actually one of his first, before he did Chick Tracts, and you can see this is 1954. He did these kind of one-panel caveman strips that kind of played off of the idea of like ancient caveman times, kind of having modern problems. That kind of
wait a second. Are we saying that the Flintstones, in addition to ripping off the Honeymooners, were aping Jack Chick?
That is something that has been posited. In fact, David Daniels posits that one of the main two of the main characters from this strip had names that ended up being similar to Fred and Wilma, I believe. So it very well may have been a maybe not a ripped off influence, but possibly an influence. That character with the teeth on the left is the character whose name I think bears some resemblance and does predate the Flintstones. Also, is it Johnny Hart's? I don't think it's Johnny
BC.
Hart. BC.
Yeah.
So this predates both of those. And so at least according to David Daniels, there may have been an influence there. So Jack Chick did this strip for some years with a man by the name of Clayton. Clayton was a Catholic, and Clayton was supposed to be the writer while Jack Chick did all the artwork while also working at the Aerojet company where he that was his full-time job, and then he would come home and then write the comics because he wanted to get into comics. According to David Daniels, Clayton stopped doing the work, leaving all of the work to Jack Chick, and Jack Chick basically something had to give and eventually. And so he basically broke his contract with the syndicate because his partner apparently wasn't doing his share of the work. And once you break a contract with the syndicate, they kind of, made sure he never worked in that neighborhood again.
Right.
They're
called the syndicate for a reason, kids.
Yeah. So he ended up, while working at Aerojet, he was listening to some revival. I think it was Charles Finney revival on the radio. And he basically just started illustrating some of that. And someone basically said, "Hey, why don't you kind of, self-publish what you're drawing in a spiritual way?" And God opened some doors for him. And I do want to, before we dive into the aspects of this, some of the Jack Chick's horror elements, and maybe even some of the criticism that I have of Jack, I do want to say this, which is the fact that people have come to Christ because of Jack Chick tracts. Many people have, in fact, done so. And so I am not, I think it would be the height of hubris to look down at someone who has successfully evangelized. I have differences with Jack Chick, some strong ones regarding some of the stances that he has taken.
Well, and I think anybody who's watched the show knows that I have a lot of respect for the Catholic Church. Where I think that I'm not. There are evil men in every sector, but that it's not unique to any specific branch or doctrinal framework. I don't think, and the other thing I think to recall too is a person has flaws, right? But what God chooses to do with a person is beyond and outside of that. So none of our heroes come out spotless. Nobody gets out alive. We're all broken, flawed, and ridiculously pitiable. So, but
yeah. So I just want to make it clear that, like, evangelism, bringing, helping to bring people to Christ is something that I will not look down on. So, despite the criticism I have of Jack Chick and some of his stances, I'm not going to, like I said, denigrate him for that. That being said, let's jump into some of the examples that I've got and flesh out some of this here. So one thing that I think is fascinating. So one thing about Jack Chick that is interesting is the fact that Jack, after I think 1970, he basically became a recluse. Now, before that, here's where things get very interesting. Before he became a recluse, he actually had some aspirations to work in Hollywood. He was an actor for like school productions. He had a scholarship to a post high school, I think it was a Playhouse scholarship, like for 2 years, like a full paid one before he was drafted into World War II. And when he came back, he got married. He got saved on his honeymoon, and very quickly was, passionately for the Lord. And he and his wife were about to enter into Hollywood, and they had an experience where the producers were apparently talking about, actresses sleeping around everywhere, like the casting couch, essentially. Mm-hmm. And when you first hear the story, it sounds almost a bit, again, conspiratorial, which, does kind of is something that does happen in Jack Chick, stories at times. But what I think is very interesting is that now we know, especially even in pop culture, in mainstream culture, the whole Harvey Weinstein effect, about how true some of that seedy underbelly of Hollywood was. So Jack Chick ditched that. He also he got burned by some, church supposed Christian sources as well. So he just started just doing his tracks, doing his own thing, not giving out any interviews. So the other thing that I have to bring to the table here, in addition to, like I said, his negative experience with some Roman Catholics, apparently he had an aunt who hated him and who was a Catholic. He had some very negative personal experiences with them. Jack's story also has more personal tragedy. so it piles some more on, right? Actually, let me pop up this one here. So Jack's daughter, and again, this is all comes from that material that I got from his business partner. One of the difficult things about getting information about Jack is that, like I said, because he became a recluse, we don't really have a lot of, and because he's deceased, we actually don't have a lot of ways to sometimes get at information if people aren't going to volunteer it. But what we do know, and you can look up some of this information, is the fact that his wife became very ill with a disease that was not quite named, and so he had to spend a lot of time taking care of her. So that also made him a bit of a recluse. On top of that, he had one daughter, and the daughter went into a very strong set of rebellious phases. And that's the one I'm kind of sharing right now, that I think a strip that actually ties into some of that. This one's called Party Girl. And so Jack Chick's daughter, she rebelled so hard and got involved with like witchcraft. She got involved with drugs. And again, there's a lot of stories that aren't told. I believe she did have an abortion through one of her boyfriends. Eventually, Jack went and picked her up from some, I don't know if it was a flop house or something. And her body was so destroyed that they were basically wheeling her out in a wheelchair. You can see some before and after pictures of Jack Chick's daughter, and she looks she looks a very normal, beautiful girl in one photo, and in the next photo, she looks like she looks like a meth victim. The emaciated, skeletonized kind of look. And
heroin chic, they used to call it.
So yeah, it wasn't specified what exactly she was destroyed with. I don't know if I don't know if she had AIDS. I don't know, because again, it could have been a mixture of things. But she died She did not survive too long. And so he ended up losing, his only daughter. He did lose his wife eventually. And so I think some of those traumatic experiences also influenced his work. He was a man who was very strongly believed in his mission. And this is the other side of Jack Chick, the positive side, the side that I very much empathize with. He wanted to bring people to Christ, and it was motivated out of love. He did not say, "I hate you, here's this tract." It was, "I love you," including Roman Catholics. So even though he declared war on the Catholic Church, he loved Catholics, he loved people. And so that's the you don't know Jack, essentially, because people will take a look at Jack Chick and his tracts and just call him a purveyor of hate speech, for example.
Well, and there's one of the things that comes to the idea that I think a lot of people in our culture have such a hard time with, is the idea that disagreement, right? You can disagree with somebody, you can think somebody is super wrong, and you can still value them as a human person. And that's one of the things that I think that there's a certain level of even mockery in a lot of Chick tracts, where he's mocking an opinion or a thing that he holds to be false. And so he's like, well, here's this false thing. I'm going to make fun of this false thing and hopefully, snatch somebody away from their trouble.
So the reason I brought up this Party Girl strip is that, it's I think this strip is kind of a version of events. This also, which makes it kind of a bittersweet tract, but this strip, and here we have, Satan with wearing the pentagram. This we'll get into this in a second. All the horror elements that Jack Chick uses, but in this version of events, the party girl is about to be poisoned, and she is saved and then saved for good through Christ. And so this story has a happy ending. And knowing what we know about Jack Chick and his life and his daughter, I think this tract probably had a very personal, appeal to him. So, like I said, guy had a pretty hard life by a lot of metrics.
So that's a good question. Now that comes to the looking at the horror elements, and I don't want to necessarily get into. There's so much to talk about that in terms of the iconography of horror in the 20th century.
Oh, I've got some stuff for you.
Oh yeah.
This is where it sucks, because I wish we could ask him or maybe have greater access to his influences, because I would wager, because before Jack Chick was saved, he was in the army. Obviously he loved comics. He wrote them. I have a feeling he read some horror comics like EC or the Harvey comics. Like I'm going to show you a couple of tracks and you're just going to say, this reads exactly like Tomb of Horror. It's got a Christian message at the end. And so when I first said, oh, Jack Chick is a horror writer, I was talking about like the elements of horror and spirituality, and how, I think it takes a sense of morality from a philosophical sense to really tap into the elements of horror. I did not know that Jack Chick legitimately just used horror things. And so I'm going to show you a couple of tracks here where he just flat out he tells an entire story with a vampire. And he does another one where there's one, I think one of them has Freddy Krueger in it. One of them is clearly a Friday the 13th ripoff. So he clearly knew his horror.
And this comes down to one of the things that I wanted to discuss today, right? Is the idea. I have this belief, and I'm not alone in this, but I honestly think that you cannot have real horror outside of a supernatural worldview, right? If we're just meat bags running around and there's nothing to it, that's not terrifying. That's just the state of things. But if we have if there's an eternality to our existence, if there is real truth, if beauty is something to be craved, if life is something to be built toward a future, then I think you can have horror. I think you can have that kind of existential dread that you need. And so I don't think you can have horror outside of that Judeo-Christian time frame. That really, because even other people that do it, still borrow from those things. Friday the 13th, borrows. A Nightmare on Elm Street borrows from that Christian worldview.
Well, Friday the 13th rips off Halloween with Michael Myers like wholesale.
Oh yeah.
I know. The other thing I'll bring up is the fact that there's classically speaking, there's a difference between the concepts of horror and terror.
Yes.
And in modern parlance, they tend to get kind of swapped in our understandings of them. But classically, horror is basically jump scares, and terror is the kind of like fear over like kind of the slow burn that we get from dread, I guess. So in modern parlance, we kind of have that swapped. We tend to think of horror as being what terror was. So let's jump into this one. So Camp Basil Bub. Okay, what does that remind you of? All right. So we start off with Camp Basil Bud, and everybody who's anybody from Salem High will be here. So we have, again, more horror references. Jack Chick clearly knows his horror. So they're worried about a supernatural killer, and this guy bursts down the door with a pumpkin on his head and a chainsaw and kills a bunch of people, just like a lot of kind of a pastiche of horror films, really.
Right.
But of course, because it's a Jack Chick track, the killer has to be revealed instead of being Jason. It's, of course, the devil. And then at the very end, what defeats him is being the rebuke of the devil. And we have a Bible verse for that. The end of this, of course, gives us the dark side of Halloween and a proclamation that God hates Halloween and its evil origin. It's, it's essentially, the devil's day.
Right.
And then, of course, ending with the classic kind of salvation and hell dichotomy that happens a lot in Jack Chick tracks. But one of the things I wanted to mention is the fact that there's quite a lot of horror elements that are operating in this strip. And if you look at like the shading, if you look at the artistic depictions, and even like I said, the references here, like this is clearly operating in a lot of horror ways. But there's some that I think are even stronger. So let me pull up this one here. This one's called The Thing. And this one not only has horror elements, it follows the horror structure of what I would say is a pretty traditional horror comic. So first off, we have that eye concept going on there, which is very common in EC comics and crime comics that got Frederick Wortham to do Seduction of the Innocent. But look at this opening panel. If you were just to see this in a comic, what kind of comic would you say this came from?
Oh man, that's awesome.
This is like straight out of a Tomb of Horror EC comic tradition.
Yep.
So, Mother, it's Maria. The Thing is after her again. Again, there's just the depictions here, the strong, the shading, the lighting. Really amplify the Roman Catholic imagery, the priest who's defeated by the supernatural source. Of course, we know Jack Chick was going to do that anyway because it's a Roman Catholic. But now that the evangelical has shown up, he can defeat through Christ. They're able to defeat. But look at this guy getting mangled by the possessed woman. And then again, some really, crazy, body contortions and facial contortions. At the very end of it, the girl is saved. She's delivered from the possession. But there was a skeptic. There was a guy who wasn't a Christian, and he's the one who got his face scratched, and he's mad and upset. And so what happens to him when the demon is named and cast out, the very end of it, is the demon possesses the skeptic. There's that twist, the turn that happens
at the end where you zoom in on the villain and his eye opens just before the credits roll.
Right. My name is Verano. This is exactly a horror comic ending, like to a T. Yeah. So again, I was being slightly facetious when I said Jack Chick, great horror writer. I did not know that structurally he was just flat out, in fact, in some cases, just by the book doing horror comics.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that is a little like, I'd love to know when like this was done, right? Like what time frame we're looking at here, because like, so Chick was in World War II and they came back and he was doing comics in the early 50s, like the early 50s, like 50, I think 49 to 53, maybe even 54 was like the height of, well, probably 53 was the height of EC with what they were doing with that whole line. They'd actually had some losses and stuff even before the Senate thing happened, right? Mm-hmm. So that was the height of their stuff. That would have been the time that he was working on his little pencil strip, right? The little Gag-A-Day thing.
Yeah. And
so I mean, this would have been all in the mix. So I would love to know when like this one was actually worked on. I don't know if there's any place to look that up.
So the difficult thing,
because it's been digitally retouched.
Okay.
You can tell there's a few.
So this one says 1971,
okay,
which may in fact be when he did it.
So this is right when Exorcist is out in the theaters. You've got the Hammer horror films have been going on there. So got some.
Yeah, it just I do like just the way they're paced, and again, even the Back from the Dead strip. Mm-hmm. Just again, some of the imagery, it's clear that he's aware of his horror. Now, knowing Jack Chick, I don't think after he was saved, he probably watched horror films much, if at all. He took a very hardline stance against that sort of thing, or horror comics. And so part of me wonders if he maybe during World War II and maybe just afterwards, if maybe he read, early scary comics, maybe before he was saved, maybe convicted on those things. Because like I said, I feel like he's clearly aware of these conventions and these traditions. And I feel like you'd only be aware of those things and be able to replicate them on this level if you had read some of them. But I don't know if we would be able to get the answer to that particular question.
I don't know, but I think it's definitely, I mean, the man was a master of his craft. And that's something that when you think about how prolific, I mean, how many hundreds of tracts like that he did. I don't know the number. I didn't look it up.
Like he did them. I don't know the exact number, but he did tons of them. He was a machine. He did them until like he basically died. Like on his deathbed, he was still working on them. Like that's how much he did them. All right. So this one, again, it gets into some interesting territory here. This one is just a story about a vampire with full on witches and vampires. And you'll notice a reference in this one when you pull it up.
Okay. There's 250 different titles.
250. Oh geez. Yeah. I was thinking it was hundreds.
Yeah. 250 titles. And according to the company, I just looked this up. Their estimates are 800 million tracts sold in the first 50 years. That is the most widely circulated comics.
Now, we do have to give a slight caveat to that because these are the type of tracts that get disseminated, and not all of them are read.
Right.
So there's only a percentage of them that get read. A lot of them, unfortunately, get thrown out. That's a good point. That is a good point. But you're right. 800
million is crazy circulation numbers.
You're totally right.
I mean, it is over 50 years. So I don't want to do the math, but that's crazy. That's crazy numbers. Anyway, so
all right. I got a vampire thing to show.
Oh, that's ready there. I was like, why aren't you sharing it? I have to share it. I have to share it.
Okay, so first off, the dog here. If you're a Jack Chick aficionado. This dog makes a bunch of appearances in his work, not with fangs, but just the dog. So keep your eye out for that. So all right, Rhys, in that first right panel, we have some clear vampires, but who is that in the back?
It's Blade.
So again, I don't think Jack Chick participated a lot in pop culture, but that being said, he clearly knew enough about pop culture to put Blade in a cameo in his own horror comic / evangelism tract. And I'm pretty sure that's Gandalf on the right.
It's either Gandalf or Hagrid. I'm not sure which.
I'm probably Gandalf. He really didn't like Harry. I'm pretty sure they took a pretty hard stance on Harry Potter. Harry Potter does make a very small appearance in one of them. I think I've got it pulled up, but he's like on a poster, and then directly called out as being, satanic. But in this one, we just clearly have vampires and monsters. Again, some of these. I don't remember which strip it was, or tract it was. One of them had young Frankenstein, like Gene Wilder and the Igor character, in making the cameo. So he put and one of them has a Freddy Krueger in it. So he knew his horror at least good enough to put cameos of these characters. So he was at least pop culturally aware. Again, I don't think he watched the movies or anything, but he knew enough to put background references. So in this strip, we just legitimately have a vampire. Here's the vampire's son. He's supposed to be like a vampire second coming or something. And they send him after his first victim, a Christian girl named Faith. And she gives out some candy and tracts.
And chick tracts.
Yep. Now here's the important thing. So for those of you who knew people who gave chick tracts instead of candy, or who gave chick tracts instead of tips, know this, that the official chick tract stance was to give candy and a tract, to not be the lame house that only gave out a tract. Hey, I know you want hot chocolate, but I'm just going to give you a tract.
I heard somebody say once that we're talking about witnessing at Halloween and this whole thing, and they said people only giving out tracts. You should be giving out full-size candy bars. If God's blessed us with eternal life, bless your neighbors with full candy bars.
So that's right here again.
I don't have that kind of money, but that's a really good thought.
Here's the official chick tract stance. Look at you. Here's some candy and little comics. So you're supposed to do both. All right. So for those of you who are looking into maybe disseminating tracts, even the writer of the tracts knew you were not supposed to stiff people.
He was anti trick or treating. He said, if you're going to do it anyway, make sure you give them good candy. The good stuff, not those tiny little like ball things. Come on.
Not candy corn.
Not candy corn. Not the small things of sixlets. Nobody's got time for that. Come on.
So the vampire shows up, and it's kind of a comical vampire, but he's got fangs, and he actually tries to do a vampire attack, and he's repulsed by holy power. This is one of the most fanciful of his tracts. And the vampire, of course, gets saved. And he comes back and declares to his vampire household that he is now a Christian. And then when his vampire household say, Satan, why didn't you tell us he was the promised one? He goes, I lied.
That's what I do.
And the ending is perfect. That's it. If you can't trust Satan, who can you trust? Jesus, shut up. I have to admit, in terms of the comedic punch, this is probably one of his best tracts.
That's amazing.
This one's really good.
That's so good. That is so good. That is like serious, great cartooning.
So this one doesn't end with the character going to hell so much. Yeah. Which does bring up one of my biggest issues with Jack Chick as a whole. As I'll say this as I pull up my next reference here. One of my biggest issues with Jack Chick, unfortunately, is I think that, and this is something that we see in some evangelical circles. If the Roman Catholics see Mary everywhere, they see Mary in their soup. We could say that some evangelicals see Satan in their toast. So it's a world where there are demons everywhere, and they're just entirely covering the world in a sense, and that causes I think a skewed worldview. Because if the world is what I would say, the world was made by God, and it may be under a curse from a Christian worldview, but it doesn't mean that there is nothing good in the world. In fact, everything that's good in the world is God, and there's quite a lot of it. It's to see it otherwise is to see the world in a very, I would say, either Gnostic or Manichaean sort of way. A fallen world is still fallen from goodness, So I'm not going to say like, oh, everything is great. So I'm not skewing myself that way, but there is a tendency to just see Satan everywhere. And like I said, I think that misses a lot of the good that's in the world.
Well, and I think one of the things that it kind of tends to do for a lot of people, and one of the reasons that I think there's a certain power that kind of thinking has, is it frees people from the understanding of how terrible we are, right? Yeah. Like the world is bad enough with just people in it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're rotten enough just as we are, and I know that some people disagree with me on all of that. We are utterly depraved. Even the good things that we do are really kind of awful. So that's one of those things that when it comes to, and I do think that we do live in a world that is exactly the shape it would be if a devil existed. So I definitely believe that there is in fact a devil, but he doesn't need that. We don't need that much help.
Yes. One thing when you have I've got the next one pulled up. Unfortunately, when you get that world view, and so this one starts off with what's worse, flea or a demon? And there's our dog again. Our lovely.
It is the same dog.
Yep. But the idea here is the fact that just like there are fleas everywhere, there's basically demons everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And again, I believe in dark spiritual forces. I believe in, in the devil and in demons and those darkness. But if you believe that they infest every square inch of your world, mm-hmm. then you basically attribute to the forces of evil. You attribute to Satan the omnipresence that God that only God has. Mm-hmm. Only God's omnipresent.
Well, and I mean, and in a lot of ways, I don't necessarily think this has been chick stance, but it is a fact with a lot of people that see anytime I was overtaken by a demon of lust. Well, maybe you're just a dirty pervert.
Yeah.
Let's don't give the devil credit for your what bad decisions or whatever.
Yeah. So Dave Asano, what's
Shanovich, I think.
Shanovich.
He's never corrected me. I've been saying it that way for a year, and he's never corrected me.
Says, aren't all vampires technically Christian? The whole cross thing. Well, it's an interesting point.
Actually, the vampire as reimagined and introduced into our culture by Bram Stoker is actually Antichrist. Is an anti-Christian thing. Is the Dracula is the exact inversion of Christ. Whereas Christ died that you may live, Dracula lives through your death. So, yeah. I could get. I've gone more into that before, and I could, but I don't want to take time right now. But
also, Jack Chick did not particularly like rock music. So
yes, very much so.
But he only did like one strip on it. And this is where I have to say that as much as I don't particularly care for the whole, I guess what I would say, overly too much Satan, I guess, in things. If you look at, he did a lot of strips that were just like Bible stories. Mm-hmm. If you look at his strips, he did a ton of them that were not that. He gets again a lot of reputation for some of the more, I guess, inflammatory ones, especially like I said later on, the ones he did about the Catholic Church. But
and some of them, I mean, and the other thing about it too is some of Chick's stuff, right? Like when you talk about Christian art, this is a recurring theme, right? Is sometimes Christian art sucks. It's too on the nose, right? It's not nuanced enough. It's too rigid. It doesn't really relate to the human experience because it's so interested in getting a message across. And a lot of Chick tracks fall into that.
Yes.
But that's also their purpose, right? I mean, he wasn't trying to make high art. He was trying to look for excuses to talk about, these different things. Talk about salvation. Talk about repentance. Talk about sin. So it's more preaching than it is storytelling. And that's why when I look at the storytelling elements and a lot of them, how good they are, and like that's one thing with here, like this comic, man, it's a really thrilling, like spy style story about smuggling Bibles. It's really cool, right? My 13-year-old me was like, "Ooh, where are more of these?" And I couldn't get any.
Like I said, Jack Chick tracks terrified me as a child. So like I said, that also drew me to the idea that I think they make good horror comics.
Mm-hmm.
You look at this panel.
Oh man.
And I think this is the one that we'd used for our thumbnail today, which is the Back from the Dead one. Yeah. And so in this one, this guy has like a life after he's brought back after kind of being technically dead for a minute. And again, right there, straight out of a horror comic. Again, like I said, you can't tell me Jack Chick did not at least read at least one EC comic during his life, because he's pulling so much from it, I think, or that tradition. And he's, and a lot, again, even the hellish imagery, there's a lot of like monsters and stuff in there. Definitely a lot of his stuff hits very much on the nose. That was the other thing I was going to say. One thing I'm going to critique. There are occasionally some weaknesses in Jack Chick's technical level. One of the strongest weaknesses, or one of the most, not strongest weakness, one of the biggest weaknesses that he has is in lettering. This really shows pretty glaringly in his actual in the tracks. It doesn't show as badly because tracks are supposed to be super compressed, so you're not paying as much attention to some of the technical details. But in the full page comics, he uses the exact same like Microsoft. I don't know.
It's just a sans serif font. I mean, it was before like the Crusader series, I think, was published from like 78 through like 81, like once a quarter. So I mean, it was pre like word processor. It was just whatever the and like you look at like some early Charlton books were the same way, which I recently discovered. I don't know, I can't remember who was telling me about it, but like Charlton books were Charlton got into comics just as a way to make up the ends of their paper rolls, so they could get them have something instead of just throwing away the ends of their paper rolls. So their lettering was terrible, especially in the earlier days. So Jack Chick clearly he put the work into some of the art, but it was very clear that he just slapped the lettering on top and just called it a day. And apart from some sound effects, so we can see this wham right here is pretty good. But when it came to a lot, I mean, paramedics, like the exact same font as the rest of this, like every single sign, every single word. If Jack Chick was not drawing it, it often got really rough. He also copied and pasted images, I think, from previous strips, cut down on time production, which leads to some really jarring moments where it's like, okay, this clip from this part of the track does not match the art style or art rendering. I guess it looks like it's been kind of like photocopied or something into it. Because I believe after a while I think they got their own printing press and just started printing them on their own as well. They became like their own like one, their own entire operation essentially. So there are some, if we look at them from a technical aspect, again, there are some weaknesses. And like I said, I think you notice that more in the full page comics, because those often are in color. I think the one you have is that one in color? Yep. Yeah. Full color.
Yeah. So which makes the really amateur lettering stand out a lot more than it does necessarily even in the tracks themselves. Yeah.
And I mean, like I said, those were kind of an experiment that didn't last forever. I mean, they went into multiple printings on all that stuff too, but they weren't. It wasn't an ongoing thing. That wasn't where I don't know if he didn't get the pull he wanted out of them, or what the story was, or if that's just all he wanted to do was just a few of them.
He did the entire Alberto series in comic book form. So I do know that. And the Alberto thing became a very, like I said, almost like a crusade for him. So of course we have to mention this one. This one is obviously one of his most, notorious and famous strips, the Dark Dungeons one.
And there's for several reasons, one of which I just found out about, like like a couple weeks ago. But you keep going first.
So there was I believe they made a film adaptation or something of this. Not I don't think Jack Chick made it, but someone was influenced by this tract and I think made a film.
Yeah, they licensed it. It's officially like Jack Chick's Dark Dungeons.
Okay. All right. So it's actually, I didn't know I wasn't aware of the official connection there, but yeah, so there's a film adaptation of this particular one. And it's kind of wild. I
haven't seen it, but Evie actually pointed it out to me, and I was just like, I can't believe this exists. That's insane.
So a lot of them are out of. There's a chunk of them that are out of print. So when you go to jackchick.com, you actually have to open your results to the out of print tracks, or else it won't display on the site. You can still get them, but you have to custom order them in a quantity of 10,000 or more. But you get half price. So, and I will say again, that would still cost you a bit, but there's still like 17 cents a piece, and then half price would be like what, 8 or 9 cents. So, what does that come out to? I can't do the math in my head.
Yeah. That's some.
It would still be a chunk of money, but it's not as crazy as you might think at first. Okay, but this one starts off with them playing a Dungeons and Dragons game, and one of the characters dies, which of course happens a lot when you play D&D. Your character your party gets wiped. Apparently,
especially if your DM is a real dick,
right? Or if you're playing a wizard at level 1, because wizard at level 1 is basically worthless,
super squishy.
Basically, you're a walking cantrip. You're a flashlight. You're a flashlight. Hey, I can cast light 3 times a day. So the character dies and she can't handle it. No, not Blackleaf. No, I'm going to die. And as later happens in the strip, the person who died in the game died in real life. She commits suicide because her character died. So. We discussed earlier how on the nose some of the Jack Chick plot lines can be. And then of course one of the biggest issues that Jack Chick has is he sees the Dungeons and Dragons game as being inherently linked to occult and witchcraft and the satanic panic, essentially of the 80s.
Yep, and before that, I mean, like
yes.
that was. That was a subtext theme. I mean, that's why, like, there was, moves against, monster movies in the 60s and 70s. It's so, I can get the whole thing.
So this one, this one's from
talking about Black Sabbath, but we won't do that.
This one's from 1984. Yeah. But again, some pretty strong, even here, again, very strong line work. Again, that that ending, very strong ending. This one spawned a movie.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the most interesting things. Like, I saw the trailer for the movie after Evie told me about it, and the thing I was most stunned by, just absolutely stunned by, is like, I expected it to be like super cringy, like low production value thing, and surprisingly it's not. I mean, like, it's the lines from the trailer, some of them are a little cringy, right? But it's not the production value that's cringy, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the on the noseness of it all. And I suppose if you could separate the on the noseness of it as a piece of propaganda from the fictional story they're telling, the idea about a dungeon master who's using the people from the game as real life pawns.
That's a great story.
That's a great story.
This is where I have to bring up the fact that Jack Chick had connection. He was an actor. He was, going up to go into Hollywood. So he had some, connections. He had experience in acting, which he brings, I think, to the page. And to the drama, because all of these stories are 24 pages, and each page is essentially one panel. So he's telling a page, and he's telling a story in essentially 24 panels or so. So very compressed storytelling. But like I said, Jack Chick had some chops. He had some chops in those production realms. So he wasn't just it's not all amateur hour. Dave says there were D&D episodes of MacGyver and the Greatest American Hero.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't think I realized that.
I did. That's before my time. But like I said, this definitely tied into, like I said, they say satanic panic. And let's see, there's one more I wanted to show so that we could toss Harry Potter under the bus.
That's probably fair. Harry Potter's got some splaining to do.
So this is the one that distinctly calls out Harry Potter. It's a witchcraft-related strip. A young woman and her, young woman and her friend essentially are doing some witchcraft. Oh wait, I pulled up the wrong one. Give me a second. This one's just more about Halloween and witches. Still a good. Like I said, he did quite a few Halloween strips. This one has the razor blades in the candy. A kid dies because he eats candy that has been poisoned and spiked. So if anyone remembers those stories, it's that one. Hold on, I'll pull it up. I got them all here. Is it this one? No, it is the Nervous Witch. The Thing, Boo, Party Girl. Hold on. Heck, where are they? One of the ones that I thought was really wild. I thought I had them all. Give me a second. Give me a second. I'll pull it up in a second.
Really quick. See. Oh, jeepers. I thought I had a PDF I was gonna share. One of the reasons I wanted to have FlyFoxPro on, in addition to the fact that we've talked about Chick in the past, was that he was actually commissioned by Skinny Matt Veely, to do a pastiche of the Dungeons and Dragons Chick tract.
Oh.
And it's about and so I thought that would be a fun thing to show, but I thought I had a PDF of that, but I don't. I just have the physical one wherever I put it. So
all right, I got it.
I already ran off to get one thing. I don't want to run off to get another one.
No, you're good. I got you. Okay, so here, like I said, we have the two young girls, and of course, like I said, Satan is everywhere, especially around witches. There's Harry Potter on the right.
Yep. As a poster. Oh, look, there's a little Hedwig toy.
Oh, a Hedwig?
The Harry Potter's owl.
Oh, the owl. Okay, yeah. So clearly we have the Harry Potter and we have the owl.
I guess we know who's really read Harry Potter here.
Oops, I got exposed.
Now I'm embarrassed. They're not terrible. They're just not the only book in the world.
So if you thought that, oh no, that's just a coincidence, we get to the end here, and the guy who's kind of interjecting himself. And again, when Jack Chick wanted to make someone look ugly, he really knew how to do it. He had an eye for the grotesque.
And then I also noticed she scrolled past. It looked like somebody was telling the story about the
Witch of Endor.
Witch of Endor, yeah,
that is correct.
Very cool.
Yeah,
nice tie-in, Jack.
Definitely there. Again, lots of almost like I would say I can't pronounce it. Hieronymus Bosch. I feel like there's almost a Boschian because just with all the demon designs that he pulls in, the kind of monster creature thing he does, kind of reminds me, I think, a bit of Bosch. Or who's the other one who did demons a bunch? I forget his name. He did the one where the demon sits on the guy's chest, and I forget.
I don't know your guy's name, but I know what you're talking about.
Okay, so this one, where is it? Here we are. 1 hour later, after this girl is delivered from her demonic possession, tell me, how did you two get into the craft? Through Harry Potter books. So clearly Jack Chick he's calling out Harry Potter. So
very explicitly.
Very explicitly. But like I said before, again, the more I read some of these particular tracks, the more I really grew to appreciate Jack Chick as a potential horror comics writer, and not just in a facetious sense, but in a, oh my gosh, you literally are just in every way.
Well, and I mean, and that's part of the deal. Like, he's dealing with the grotesque, he's dealing with the subversion of expectation, he's dealing with the idea that that there are terrors beneath the surface, right? Things that go bump in the night, and what happens when the night bumps back, right? And I mean, and of course, you know, he says it's all demons, it's all Satan. That whole thing is part of it, but that's also very much of a horror thing, right?
To kind of bring it home though to the whole, like, Christianity and horror, or at least Christianity and terror, if we're using the classical term, is the idea that if you have a purely secular mindset that has no acknowledgement of the spiritual, I think it is harder to appreciate, not impossible, but I think it becomes a lot harder to appreciate some of the nuances to terror writing, essentially, right? Because, oh, look, there's a monster over there. But in a purely secular mindset, the monster is just a creature. Mm-hmm. And you're just a lump of dead tissue that just dies at some point. So all you get is the horror, or just the jump scare, which is basically a pop that kind of just, like, hopefully raises your hackles for just a moment. But there really isn't much to it after that. And in today's age of increasing moral relativism, is there any behavior that you can actually be terrified of? Because everything is supposed to be relative, right? So, like, someone's behavior, even if it's going to be harming children, is it's up for debate in some circles, even,
But don't harm those dogs.
Yeah. There's our true terror. So the point that I'm trying to, the point here is the fact that a Christian, however, who has a knowledge of the spiritual dimension, who believes that life exists after death, who believes in spiritual forces, that we can suffer from spiritual things while we're alive and afterwards. Now you got something to worry about. And if Dracula can mess up your relationship with God through, kind of almost removing your salvation, which is kind of what he kind of does in the original novel.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
It is a terrifying concept. Especially to a Christian, the idea that you could lose your salvation to some demonic power, and that could keep you up at night. And so that's kind of where I kind of draw this thesis, which is the fact that I think a Christian, or at least a spiritual understanding, I think is necessary to some degree to have true terror.
Because the idea, like, if you look at, like, gore porn, right? Yeah. Well, if there's nothing left after, right? I mean, if this existence is our only existence, well, then once you're torn apart, well, that's it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's one of the reasons, like, zombies have become so. There was a lot of power in the zombie archetype for a couple of decades, and it's because it begs the question: is, are we just meat? Are we just flesh draped on bones, or is there something more to us than just material? Is there something more to us than that? Is there happiness and truth and beauty and all this stuff? Is that real? And if it's and I think that I do believe that people intrinsically believe that, even if they can't articulate it. I think that or won't necessarily acknowledge it to themselves.
Sure. But speaking of zombies, sorry, it did occur to me that Jack Chick also did a strip with some zombie imagery. So this one is called, I believe, The Walking Dead. And I believe it's a dream. That's how he gets away with the conceit of having just monsters and zombies and stuff. Again, more of that. No, I see what you mean, though. And I think I hadn't consider that with zombies in particular. I think that's a really good point, because it does kind of bring in the sort of life after death, even in a quasi even if it's not you, it's the virus animating your brain or whatever the heck.
Right. I mean,
you're still walking around technically.
Yeah. And is it what is the nature of this life after death? Right.
Yeah.
Is it a real life or is it not? And all the side of the grave. And I don't think it's as deep, like philosophical question asking as vampires could be,
right?
As Stoker did, things like that. But I do think that it's like a layman's entry into that sort of thought if people let themselves get there. So
good point.
And I think that there is, because I think that's a question. But yeah. So good stuff. A little different show today. Next week, we need to wrap up though. So next week, we are doing another
Gene Yang
installment. There we go. The word I was looking for was installment in Gene Luen Young's bookography. What's that called? Bibliography.
Yeah.
It's called The Shadow Hero. It is a golden age, a hero story, and I love it. So we'll be talking about that. Myself, Twitless, #1 Marmaduke fan, and Matt Krotz. So unless everyone bails on me. So we'll have to call it there. I know normally I have time to chill, but I have to get going. I let us run a little long today because I was really liking it, but I have to leave right away. So we'll go ahead and go read Super Schooled. Go buy
Omega Girl.
Adventures of Omega Girl, and think about death. Spend some time this week thinking about death and what might come after. Happy Halloween.
Ooh.
Ooh.